Hello and welcome to this episode of Artful Loving. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about the experience of pregnancy and birth through the father's eyes, from the father's perspective, something that's very much part of my world right now, and also something that often doesn't get shared. So if this is of interest to you, then please stick around. Hi there, I'm Nick Tovey, relationships and intimacy therapist, educator, and author of the book, The Revolutionary Man. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead, subscribe. And if you're new to me and want to know a bit more about myself, my work, and how we can possibly work together, then go and check out my website, nicktovey.com. So pregnancy, birth is such a miraculous adventure and brings with it all sorts of challenges, all sorts of fears and doubts and insecurities and potentially lots of problems and suffering, as well as the potential for amazing, beautiful experiences and so there's so much involved in the experience of pregnancy and birth. And of course, we hear a lot about the woman's experience, and of course that's so important because it is such an amazing thing for a woman to go through, and yet we don't hear a lot about the father's perspective and how it is for him going through his experience of pregnancy and birth. And as you may know already, this is something I'm very much living right now, so I felt that it was a voice I wanted to bring to this experience from the father's perspective, and shed a little light on not only my own experience, but experiences that I think a lot of men experience and go through in these times, and how it is to be the man in this phenomenal experience, which is, like I said, there's so much that we get faced with in this experience, and so it's a very unique and different perspective through the father's eyes, as it is for the woman who has all of this going on inside of her. And so I wanted to bring some voice to this and also just share a bit of my own experience. I think it's, like I said, it's a voice that we don't hear a lot of, and I think it's a very, very important voice to hear a bit more of, and in no way is any of this to discount any of the woman's experience, because my God, it's such an enormous experience. And so of course we do need to put a lot of the focus and the spotlight on that miraculous process that the woman's going through. And yet it's also important that we, as the fathers, get included in this conversation. So here I am doing that. It's such a big thing, and this is not my first rodeo. I've been here before. I've been a father to 3 children. The eldest, she isn't mine biologically, but I met her mum when she was 6 months old, and so I became father instantaneously, pretty much over the next few months of me getting to know this woman who I'd fallen in love with, and so she came as a package deal, and so I was instantly into this fathering experience. Of course, a very different experience when you're going through pregnancy together as a couple and watching the transformation and experiencing the transformation that happens not only to this woman that you're in love with, that you're partnered with, but also to the relationship. And so we then went on to have another child 2 years later. So this was my first biologically that I'd created or been a part of creating, and then went again and had another child 5 years later. And so here I am much later in life as a 48-year-old man with a new, well, not new, we've been together for 5.5 years now, but we're in a relationship where we've chosen together to bring a child into this relationship. And this was I've spoken a bit more about my experience coming up to this decision of saying, yes, I'm in, let's do this. And it wasn't an easy thing to do, given the stage of life that I'm in, and did I want to go through parenting again? Did I want to go through this experience again? It's not an easy, not a small thing to say yes to. So it took a little while, a little journey there. I'll share a little bit more of that experience up here if you're interested in going back. So to the point where, well, pretty much this time last year, we were like, yes, okay, or maybe a little sooner than this time last year, but we were like, yes, okay, let's do this. We're ready. We've got a nice home. We live in a beautiful location. We feel like we were fairly solid in our community, and it felt like now was the right time to do this, to start bringing a child into our relationship. And unfortunately, we went through a couple of miscarriages early on. So this time last year, October and November 2021, and so we had two early pregnancy losses within 6 to 8 weeks of the gestation period, which were really difficult, really challenging, and there was a lot of grief involved in that, a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment, and so the beginning of our experience of pregnancy, of bringing a child into this world, was not easy. It was a bumpy ride for a few months there, and then until we we didn't fall pregnant, we chose to become pregnant in February of this year, 2022. And so this was obviously a very planned experience. It wasn't accidental. It was but also it came with a lot of anxiety because of the previous couple of experiences that we'd had, and it was so there was just this expectation and this fear of losing this child again for the third time, and of course, so that first trimester was quite tricky in a lot of ways. I just want to talk a little bit about the pregnancy losses first. I think that's an important perspective to share. So of course, pregnancy loss is a really unpleasant thing to go through, and of course it has varying degrees of unpleasantness depending on the term of the child, of the fetus at that stage that it's lost. And of course later on it can be particularly traumatic and unpleasant for the mother particularly, but I also feel that there's no taken away from the fact that even in early pregnancy loss, it can be a really, really challenging thing to experience. For me, particularly as the father, of course, and throughout this whole experience, I think what's important to highlight here is that as parents, as a man and as a woman, bringing a child into the world, of course we're having very, very different experiences, and this was very evident here from the outset. I'm not growing this child inside of me, and so the connection that I have with this child, particularly at the early phases, is kind of abstract. There's not a lot of personal connection. Of course there's emotional connection, there's the excitement and the potential of what's going to come from this, but there's a certain level of separation that the father has to that fetus and to that embryo, and so it's quite abstract in a lot of ways. And so in the loss that I experienced was quite different to the loss that my partner experienced, and of course it's going to be quite different, because we're having very different experiences. And so it was a challenge for me to feel, of course, my own level of grief and disappointment and sadness and all of that, and also to be with my partner and recognize the level of grief that she had. And so a real challenge of moving to that point of empathy, where it's not about, empathy is not about, I understand what you're going through. Yeah, it's like, I want to understand what you're going through, because there's no way I can ever understand what my partner was going through in that time when she's losing a thing that was growing inside of her. It's such an incomprehensible experience for a man to have, and yet it was very, very real and very visceral for my partner in that moment. And so that was quite a challenge to have. And then of course the second one happened, and the experience that particularly my partner went through in that moment was really crushing and quite long lasting. And so again, really quite challenging to be with her in this at times, to go, I have no idea what you're going through, but I want to be here for you. I want to support you through this, and I also want us to try again and to have a positive way forward into having another attempt, of course, when we feel ready, and let's not get bogged down in the this is never going to happen story. Yeah. And so my perspective was quite different to hers at that time, and of course I didn't put any pressure on. It wasn't like that, but there's clearly very different experiences that we were going through. So, and again, I think the important point here is there's no way I could ever understand that. There's no way I can ever understand that. And one of the, I think, overarching themes of this whole journey of pregnancy and birth, of course, is that as a man, as a partner to a woman who's going through this experience, or even, it's such an incomprehensible experience for to be witness to be of support in, to observe, to navigate our own internal struggles with it, whilst not projecting any of that onto her. And I'll get more, a lot of this will come a bit more apparent as I go through this talk here. It's such an interesting experience. It's a fascinating experience, and I think what I'm very grateful for in this experience, which is probably quite different to the earlier experiences I had in my life, is that I have a level of awareness and inquiry into my own process in this birthing experience, and of course our process and my partner's process. But watching my own internal experiences, being witness to my partner's internal experiences, and also seeing the interactions that happen between us and the ways in which this journey has an impact on our relationship. This is a really crucial aspect, which I'll talk more about in a minute. So yes, it was a bumpy beginning to our pregnancy journey, and one that was quite emotionally taxing. And so those first couple of months of this pregnancy were filled with a lot of fear and anxiety around what is going to happen, how is this going to progress, and really not wanting to go through another loss. And of course, every week, every day was a new place that we'd gotten to in this journey. And unfortunately, my partner was extremely nauseous throughout the full first trimester. And so her ability to enjoy the moments were limited because of just the way she felt in her body. It was really challenging for her. And so, again, another way in which I'm having to try my darndest to be of support, to be there for her, to not have any unrealistic expectations of her, and also to observe the way in which our relationship and the dynamic of our relationship was changing, was fundamentally changing, and having to navigate that, having to observe that and navigate that, and not, like I said, not have unrealistic expectations on who she needed to be for me, from my self-needing perspective. quite a challenging aspect for a lot of men in this, and I think it would be very similar in a same-sex relationship with women that are going through this experience together also. Slightly different in the fact just on biology and anatomy. I think that there's definitely a lot of differences that as a man I can never comprehend what it is to be in a woman's body. I feel like one of the main challenges a lot of men potentially can face in this experience, and it's definitely been something that I've had my own degrees of challenge with at different times, and had to work with myself and in order to get to a place of comfort in this process, is the way the relationship changes. Of course, there's a situation happening here where you have a woman over here who's growing a human being in her body, and her body is engaged in this miraculous project, which I have nothing to do with. Yes, I was involved in the first instance of that happening, but this is all happening separate from me. And if I wasn't there, it would all still be happening separate from me. Of course, there would be thoughts and feelings about that experience potentially, and extra levels of challenge that she would be going through with my absence. But the reality is, a woman doesn't need a man through this process, and that can be quite a difficult thing to be with as the man, as the partner in this relationship. Of course, the ideal is that as the father we can be there in absolute support of our woman going through this experience, and yet there's also this real level of selflessness that we have to come to in this process, where here's this woman going through this miraculous process that I have no comprehension of and no ability to understand. All I can do is observe. I can support, I can be of help, I can do the practical things that I may need to do in order to support, and yet my needs aren't being met in the same way as they may have been doing before when it was just the two of us, because now there's somebody else involved in our relationship, and my partner is fully 100% engaged in growing this someone else and nurturing her and holding her in her body, and this is something that I'm separate from. That's the reality of it. And of course I can choose to be engaged, and I can choose to participate and show up to the scans and all of those things that I think a good father should do, and yet there's this level of separation that can never be surpassed. And of course this continues throughout the pregnancy, throughout the journey, and of course throughout the birth, which I'm yet to experience in this particular case. So that can be a very difficult thing to navigate for a couple, for a male partner, or for a partner of a woman who's going through pregnancy. There's a change that happens to the relational dynamic, and of course that can include your sexual relationship. There's undoubtedly going to be change that occurs by the very nature of physical comfort, the physical process that's going on for the woman in her pregnancy, pains, soreness, discomfort, and just the physical shape change. There's going to be certain things that you just can't do anymore, or maybe just don't want to do, and that's okay. It's not a problem, but it can be an adjustment that can bring its difficulties, particularly as a man when we're feeling a little bit superfluous. Yeah, and I think this can be a really challenging place for a male partner in this experience. Is what am I supposed to do in this? Yeah, in this world, I'm less important, and I don't want to mean this as being a selfish, self-centered experience, because of course it can look like that, and I've definitely seen that and observed that. But I think no matter how good the male partner is, there is gonna be a level of who's going to look after me? Who's dealing with my needs? And this might have been something that was very present prior to pregnancy in the relationship. If it's a good, solid relationship, there's a mutual support that happens. There's a looking out for each other. There's a being there for each other, which just cannot happen in the same way as it used to. And that's absolutely normal and okay and good. And it can be fucking challenging for the guy. Yeah, and I think this is super important to understand, and to have some compassion around, and to not have his challenge with that minimized. And this is a part of a problem which I see in our community, in the world, in our society, around the undervaluing or the lack of acknowledgement of the father's journey through this process. Hence my need and desire to share some of my own experience and what I've observed, not only in myself but also in my work and with clients that I've worked with. Being a parent is not a walk in the park, yeah. And of course, this challenge of the journey of parenthood starts in day one, when conception starts, yeah, when it begins, when this baby, this child, this human being starts to grow and gestate inside of its mother, and so it's not for the faint of heart, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to go through. But I really wish for all of us, mothers, fathers, aunties, uncles, everybody, to have a little more awareness and support across in a community, in a village experience. Yeah, it's so important that we don't feel like we're an isolated individual in a couple, in a relationship, particularly as the father. Yeah, and I think this is a point I want to talk about now. Because of this fundamental change that's occurring in the relationship dynamic, the father literally cannot rely on his partner to be the level of support that he may have needed and gotten used to in their relationship. She's fully engaged in a very fucking important project of building another human, and that takes a lot from her. It literally sucks life force from her in order to grow, and so she needs a much more support, much more understanding, much more care and space to do the project of pregnancy, and so it's up to us as fathers to help her, to support her in having that level of space and support. And she can't be that for us at this time. She can't be the level of support we may have need, and that's okay. So we need to adjust our expectations of her in these times. And of course, we can still have a decent relationship and be beautiful lovers and partners and all of those things. And yet there's just a change that we cannot get past. So we need to surrender to that reality. We need to allow that to happen. And we also need to take responsibility for ourselves in this time. And so what we need, really need in this time, are other people that can support us in the ways that our partner can't anymore. Yeah, and this particularly is important to have other men around. Yeah, guys that can be there for us. Particularly good if we can get other fathers or other people that understand the process of pregnancy and birth and parenting, and who can be there for us and hang about with us and just have our back. It's a really, really crucial element to this part of a father's journey. And this goes, of course, not only throughout the pregnancy, but also around the birth time. Maybe not at the birth, because you've got a responsibility to be there, but also after, in the parenting journey, particularly in those early phases, because who fucking knows how to parent this person, this new human being that you've never met before. You don't know who they are, and they're coming into your life, and now it's up to you to take care of them and keep them alive and feed them and clothe them and do all of the things of parenting, and to do that well. Yeah, who knows how to do that? So you literally have to learn on the job. And the best thing that you can do for that child is take care of yourself. Be the kind of support that you need for yourself. And sometimes that support is putting a hand up and asking for help. Yeah, whether that's with a therapist, whether that's with a group of friends, a men's group. Of course, be honest and open with your partner, but don't place expectations on her that she can't meet, because that's just going to lead to you being disappointed and resentful to her for something that she just cannot provide. Yeah, that's not to say that she needs to neglect you or any of those things and be excused in that neglect, because of course we need to be a good unit in order to parent this child. But there really is an adjustment in your expectations that needs to happen. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to come to terms with. So I really have a lot of compassion for dads that struggle with this element of parenting and pregnancy. Not a little thing at all. I want to zero in on for a moment on the sexual aspect of this relational change that happens. Of course, there's going to be a change. Yeah, it may mean that she's hornier than she used to be. That can definitely happen. There's a lot of weird chemicals that are going around in her system, and that can definitely lead some women to be more sexually desirous and more open to intimacy than they may have been before. The change in her breasts, of course, creates different levels of sensitivity. Sometimes for her, that's going to be pain and soreness and discomfort. And it's like, no, touching them isn't okay. It doesn't feel good. And so hands off. Yeah, we need to let go of our desire to touch her breasts and play with her breasts in the way that we used to like. Yeah, and of course that can be hard to deal with. There's a sense of rejection in that, maybe. Again, it's another aspect of the adjustment that we just need to navigate. We just need to find our way to being okay with. Yeah. And of course, when we're talking about penetration, penis in vagina penetration, that is going to be all sorts of different levels of sensitivity. Obviously, when there's a big bump there's going to be positions that aren't doable. And so there's we lose a level of freedom and agility in our ability to just let go and surrender to the wildness of passionate sex. Yeah, it becomes a little more clunky, and we have to bring different factors into consideration when it comes to maintaining some sort of sexual pleasure. It's not an easy thing to navigate. Yeah, but what I think is important for us to understand is that change is inevitable and it's okay. We just need to find our level of what can work for us, and maintain a level of affection and intimacy that may not necessarily involve full penetrative sex or levels of sexual touch that just don't feel comfortable. We, as the partners of the pregnant woman, we need to listen to their needs and really be attuned to what feels good to them, what doesn't feel good to them. And of course, you as the pregnant partner, you need to be really attuned to your own needs in that moment, and not just do something because you don't want to upset your partner. That's no good for you, it's no good for him. And so we really need to adjust and navigate levels of sensitivity and consent and boundaries in a way that's going to be very different to what used to happen. And this is just part of the journey. Of course, post-birth, when everything's feeling better and mum's feeling able to explore sex, which may take weeks, it may take months, yeah. We get to re-establish and re-navigate and renegotiate terms and experiences of sexual interaction and a sexual relationship that feels right for now, for that moment, yeah. And of course that can be beautiful, and there's a lot we need to let go of some of the things that may have happened and may have felt good for us prior to pregnancy. And like I said, be open to the relearning, an invitation to explore and discover new sexual dynamics between the couple. It's a big one. It's not an easy one to let go of what we are used to, what we are, and let go of the expectations and the identities that we may hold around who we are as a sexual human being. And allow for some adjustment, some flexibility and some movement in that. Anyway, there's a lot here, yeah, there's a lot here. I could definitely talk more about different aspects of it, but here I am at this point where literally birth is about to happen any day now, and you know, we're just a bit past the due date of the baby, so birth is imminent, and I really felt that it was a good thing to share some of my own experiences, but really bring into the conversation some of the things that a lot of dads would really go through and probably don't have those experiences acknowledged and heard, and maybe don't even connect with them in themselves. So I hope this is really useful for a lot of people, both men and women, all people, to understand the experience of pregnancy and birth. Well, not birth yet, that'll be part 2. But pregnancy as through the man's experience. A really, really fascinating experience. And my God, what a miracle it is. You know, the fact that the woman's body can do this is friggin' amazing. And I'm in such... Actually, I want to share this part. One of the most challenging aspects of this for me as a man, and this difference that we have as a man and a woman, is that I look at this thing that's happening and I don't get to experience it, you know, and there's a jealousy that I feel in that. There's an envy that I have for my woman in the miracle, the amazing, mysterious process that she's going through. And I'm just over here observing and witnessing and holding space for this. It's amazing, and I'm jealous. And of course I get to be a part of it as well, but I cannot imagine what that is to have happen inside of me. So mothers out there, I take my hat off to you. It's such an amazing experience. And the dads, it's not an easy journey for you either, brother. And I really, I really pray and want to make a stand for and be an example to dads to really enter in this experience with a heart wide open, knowing full well that it's going to be challenging. Anyway, I will leave it at that for this video. Part 2 will be reflections of the birth, I imagine. So let's see when that happens. Okay, thank you. If you've enjoyed what I've brought here, please click the like button, share it with your friends. I'd love to read some of your comments, questions, anything that you've got to offer and to inquire with. Yeah, please subscribe. Please send me any messages. I'd love to interact with you a little bit on this really big conversation. Much love to you. Take care.